What's Dinda's thinking right now? What's Dinda's thinking right now? What's Dinda's thinking right now? What's Dinda's thinking right now?
Hello everyone, my name is Dinda Hersya Tabita and welcome to
What's Dinda's thinking right now?
Today I'm going to talk about my favorite book, One Day We'll Talk About Today, or in bahasa is Nanti Kita Cerita Tentang Hari Ini. First of all, I will tell you a bit about One Day We'll Talk About Today. So actually, One Day We'll Talk About Today is not only a book, but also a film. And now I would like to explain about this book. So let's talk about One Day We'll Talk About Today's book. I'll start with Marcella F.P. She is the writer of this book and previously she has made 2 books, this and this. In her third book, Marcella F.P. wrote about a collection of the future letters from a character named Awan. All the future letters in this book contain advice or quotes with simple words but that are so touching because it is related to her readers. With reference to the simple things in human life, Marcella F.P. can write many beautiful sentences in this book. Not only is she a writer, she is also an illustrator of One Day We'll Talk About Today's book. Did you know, before One Day We'll Talk About Today's book was published, it turned out that Marcella F.P. had created its Instagram account first. This Instagram account, named at NKCTHI, has been around since February 2019. As I mentioned before, Marcella F.P. is an illustrator of One Day We'll Talk About Today's book, so what she writes is always accompanied by related illustration. So let me show you the book closer. So when I bought this book, I got a thank you card, and then I got a small poster about One Day We'll Talk About Today's film and song. And last but not least, I got a sticker that I like it so much. So until this day, I haven't taken it off because it is too good to stick it on something. If you want to buy this book, you can buy it at the offline bookstore or at an official merchant on the internet. The price is 125,000, but don't worry because the quality of this book is so good. And especially because this is a hardcover book with illustration inside. Okay, let me tell you about one of my favorite sentences in this book. Kadang nyaman buat kita nggak kemana-mana, tapi sulit pun buat kita nggak kemana-mana. Selalu ada alasan untuk kita yang malas berjuang. Every time I want to give up on something or even on the current situation, I always remember this sentence. I personally think that you have to buy this book because it is so good.
Let's move on to the next point. Previously, I have taught you about One Day We'll Talk About Today's book, and now I would like to explain about the film. As you can see, this is a poster of One Day We'll Talk About Today's film. Coming out in 2020, this is the first film that gets more than 2 million views in 2020. Directed by Angga Dwi Sasongko, this is a family film that is perfect for everyone to watch. And now there are 2 spin-off films of One Day We'll Talk About Today's film. There are Story of Kale and Story of Dinda. But actually, before One Day We'll Talk About Today's film came out, there was a One Day We'll Talk About Today's web series on YouTube. Not only a book and a film, One Day We'll Talk About Today is also a song. First, Rehat by Kunto Aji. In this song, there are lyrics that use the words of One Day We'll Talk About Today's book. Yang dicari hilang, yang dikejar lari, yang ditunggu, yang diharap, biarkanlah semesta bekerja untukmu. The second is an extended player or EP by NKCTHI and Petra Sihombing entitled Teman Baca Nanti Kita Cerita Tentang Hari Ini. And there are 6 songs inside. Besides that, about 1 month ago, Spotify Studios and P-Cinema has been making a podcast named NKCTHI Surat dari Awan. As a big fan of One Day We'll Talk About Today, I also bought merchandise. Yes, of course, a dark blue t-shirt of One Day We'll Talk About Today. The fabric is so good and the screen printing is also not damaged or faded even though it has been washed many times. Let's move on to the next point that makes me feel amazed with One Day We'll Talk About Today. Yes, a park. There's a One Day We'll Talk About Today's park in Bintaro Jaya Exchange Mall. This park is very unique because there is a jogging track and a children's playground, all of which are decorated with small buildings related to One Day We'll Talk About Today. So I wish I could go there reading a book while listening to the EP of One Day We'll Talk About Today. Anybody would like to ask? If you have any question, I'll do my best to answer them. So going back to what I said earlier, the word of One Day We'll Talk About Today has been adapted to many things such as movies, web series, merchandise, songs, podcasts, and even a park in Jakarta.
Well, thank you so much for your attention. Bye!